Hello, it's so good to be here with Dr. Ryan Maltese, who is the Associate Vice President of Student Success and Retention at Morgan State University.
Yes.
How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm great, Jessica. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about your experience with the NIST, working with the NIST, and also going through the diagnostic and playbook
Mhm.
process, while also continuing on through implementation services.
Yeah.
We worked with Morgan State about a year ago and went through the diagnostic and playbook process. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that process was like and how the playbook is guiding some of the work that you're still doing today?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so, and really happy to be joining you. Just for context, the relationship with the NIST and Morgan State, really has been, really predates the NIST. I mean, Morgan State has been a partner with Georgia State for about 6 or 7 years now, and that has been a really strong partnership. And me having recently kind of joined this team, I see a lot of kind of reflection of Georgia State kind of best practices. And so I didn't want to be remiss without kind of noting that, there's a very strong foundation here of really good work. And I think that kind of showed in the diagnostic, looking at that diagnostic process. Even then, I think some of the things that came out of the diagnostic, especially around, leveraging data in order to drive decision makings, looking at really the differences between academic advising and proactive advising, have been important in my early work here. And I'll even go a little bit further in saying kind of, looking at that next stage of Georgia State modeling from proactive advising to intrusive advising. Right. And I think one of the things that my teammates and I have talked a lot about is, getting to students as early as possible and walking with them through their journey, especially in their first year. And so I think a lot of what has guided our work are some of the things that came out of the diagnostic process, both in terms of the findings and the playbook that was presented, but also in the conversation kind of across campus with various stakeholders and kind of recognizing, we've got work to do, right? Like we've got a very ambitious strategic plan. We've got phenomenal leadership in both Dr. Wilson, our president, and Dr. Kara Turner, who's our senior vice president for enrollment management and student success. But they can't do all the work alone. And so really, being guided by here are some kind of concrete, solutions that we know we can put into play and areas where we can improve. And it's helped kind of guide our work. And for me, having that Georgia State background, it has supported a lot of the new initiatives that we'll be trying throughout this academic year.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so remarkable, and grateful to have you at Morgan, who, as you pointed out, has been such a strong partner for so many years. You talked about this a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit more on how the engagement with the NIST is really challenging the way you do things at Morgan?
Yeah. So one of the things when I came here, when that I think Dr. Turner and I first talked about was establishing a standard of care. And I think that's something that the NIST has really kind of brought into that national conversation. It's a question that I think is asked in every diagnostic, and I know coaches kind of repeat, kind of across the student success areas, like, what is your standard of care? And so when I first started here, I kind of brought that to the advising team to kind of ask that same question, but in the sense of what do we want our standard of care to be? What is our level of acceptability in terms of what a student receives? We're just having a conversation yesterday, in terms of transitioning. We're in a hybrid model here at Morgan. And so we'll do first year advising up to 24 hours and then transition into their major pathways to do faculty advising. And, oftentimes there's a disconnect. I mean, it happens, 10,000 students, 8,600 undergrads, faculty transitioning, students transitioning, things of that sort. But having the conversation around, a student may have transitioned, but is having, say, for instance, a hard time finding who their advisor is or connecting with them. And they may come back to us to say, hey, I need a little help. Well, it's easy to say to a student, well, you know what, I'm not your advisor anymore. You really need to talk to your new faculty advisor. They can get you on your way. But that's kind of defeating, right? Like a student walks out of your office and they've gained nothing. So, what can a student get from you that, may not necessarily be the schedule that they want for the next semester, but does the student know that they've been helped, that they've been seen, that you have basically adopted a standard of care that says, I am investing in your matriculation, your progression, and here's what I can do. And what does that look like? And that can be as simple as emailing the advisor and copying the department chair. It can be as simple as picking up the phone or directing a student to kind of follow this or telling a student, kind of who that advisor is. But it shouldn't be as simple as you're not our problem or, I can't help you. And I think for us as a team, really adopting that philosophy that we can always help students on their undergraduate journey.
Yeah, that's incredible. As you know, another, one of the pillars of working with the NIST is really making data informed decisions and thinking about how we're using data to drive solutioning and creating better student success outcomes for students. Can you talk a little bit about how you've evolved or how your institution has evolved the way it's engaged data to make decisions and engage students on your campus?
Yeah, so I'll say we are in the process of evolving, right? Okay. I think, again, Morgan State Morgan State uses data a little differently than, say, the Georgia State model. In terms of where we look at outcomes, different universities are going to have different philosophies in terms of how they best inform. I think Morgan State does a phenomenal job in looking at enrollment reports, looking at kind of where students are in their progressions, accumulation of hours, making sure students are in their pathways and majors. So I think Morgan is doing a really good job in leveraging data. I think where I'm excited for us to kind of continue on that data journey is really looking at the outcome data and doing some disaggregation, kind of at the, and I'll use Ben's word, but doing some disaggregation at the granular level so that we see the students, in all kinds of different demographies, whether it's by income status or generational status or out of state status. I mean, up to and including zip codes and high school GPAs and all of these things that students bring to bear when they show up on campus and how those things influence the student's journey, especially in the first year. And so I'm excited and been really talking with my team members about kind of identifying what is that information that we can collect from the point of admission. And then that information we can carry with the student through their advising process. And then where do we house that information so that it is accessible to anyone who is looking at that student profile? And that I'm excited to see us, and it's one of our top priorities, I think, as guided by what came out of the diagnostic and what we've been doing with our NIST coaches and talking about. And so really guiding that work and the kind of reorganizations and structural things that we need to happen and the people that we need to put in place, like the data analyst, like a chief data officer, in order to kind of affect that as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, that's incredible. And those sound like really big changes, right? And new ways of doing things. So how are you ensuring buy-in as you start to navigate some of these changes? How are you getting your whole campus bought in, especially at the leadership level?
So I ask a lot of questions. I listen more than I talk. I learn more than I teach. Again, as I said earlier, it is not for any one person to decide the journey. It is for teams to figure out how to support the journey. And so, but because, every institution is its own culture, and especially, when leaders come in who haven't been a part of that culture, I think it's incumbent upon leadership to understand how that culture works, and then how can you exist in that culture to really affect the things that you want to see. Institutions themselves are almost impervious to change, right? So you're always kind of swimming uphill. It's a matter, as you said, it's how do you get that buy-in? And then really, how do you identify the champions that believe in the work that you're doing and are willing to kind of, take that risk with you? But it's a risk that's worth taking, right? In terms of saying, what's the return on investment? What is the reward on trying to do this differently? I've said since I got here that I'm not trying to undo anything. I'm not trying to fix anything. Morgan has, it's the last 13 years, we've had over 70% first year student retention rate. For the last 7 years, we've had over, a 40% 6-year graduation rate. Now, is there work to be done? Yes, but our student outcomes, I will rival them with any of our peer institutions in that particular space. But again, until we're at 100% retention, 100% graduation, we've got work to do. And so how can we continue to improve on those processes? How can we reimagine some of the things that we're doing and maybe do those things differently? And so I think the buy-in has come with consider this as opposed to you need to do this. And that means something, especially to professionals who know the culture more than you do, who have been invested in the culture since they were a student here, basically it allows them agency in that decision-making process, which as a manager, and this, we go back a long way, that's always been important to me, is that whatever team I'm on, that everyone have an opportunity for voice and agency in that decision-making process.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, the last question I have for you is if you could just describe a little bit, what has your experience been like working with the NIST coaches?
Unique, I think, for me, because I am so connected to the NIST. I think the NIST coaching program really does provide a safe alternative space to, bounce ideas off of, where, you've got a group of folks who they're not tied to, the institution in a manner where they lose objectivity, right? And so, definitely talking with Andy and Lindsay as our coaching team, and yourself, as senior director, being able to get that kind of objectivity, to be able to say, hey, we're thinking about this, here's kind of what I'm dealing with, and, here's some solutions that have come up. What are your thoughts? And then being able to kind of bounce that, again, without having a stake beyond serving as consultants, serving as coaches. It really is helpful because there's no loss on that backside, right? It really just is, well, here's what, what are some of the things that can happen? Here's some of the things that you want to consider. And so I've kind of taken that approach and those engagements that we've had with the NIST team. And I really asked my staff, kind of the question of, if this, then what, right? And so as we work through problems, it's okay, if we do this, then what are the potential outcomes? If this, then what? And so really taking those 4 words and operationalizing them, kind of with this guidance of let's be measured in the decisions that we make and make sure that they can realize the outcomes that we want.